A former friend of mine, a Christian woman about my age, decided that her life wasn't good enough. She was not fulfilled at work. She wanted to try living somewhere other than Massachusetts. Most of all, she was unhappy in her marriage because there was not enough romance. They were merely best friends. Merely best friends? Somehow I sense that many married couples wish with every fiber of their being that they could be merely best friends. Now, I'm not opposed to romance and passion. However, although I'm not necessarily speaking from personal experience in my own marriage, I do understand from some reliable sources that the initial passion in a relationship tends to wane slightly as the years go on. After all, marriage is a life partnership, and that partnership includes tasks other than candlelit dinners and cuddling in front of the fireplace. Someone needs to take out the trash. Someone needs to clean up after the dog. Bills need to be paid, meals need to be cooked, the laundry needs to get done, and the garden needs to be weeded. And if there are children around the house, well, you get the picture. Everyday living consists of large amounts of mundane chores that are anything but romantic. And sometimes we have neither the time nor the energy to be romantic at the end of a long day of work. When two people have been on the move nonstop from 5 a.m. till 9 p.m., if they can share a few laughs as best friends at the end of the night, then I would say they have a pretty good marriage functioning in the context of the craziness of contemporary American life. And yet my friend felt that being best friends with her spouse was totally inadequate. So one day she simply said that the marriage was over, without any suggestion of trying to work on the marriage or seek counseling. Essentially in one stroke, she voluntarily gave up her marriage, her job, and her home. She just decided that she wanted something else, something more than what she already had, which in my opinion seemed to be quite a lot. Clearly, my friend believed, as many of us do, that the grass is greener with some unknown person in an unknown location working in an unknown career. I myself was heartbroken at the futility of it all, how my friend seemingly wasted everything that she had spent her adult life building up. In fairness, there may be more to the story or other issues that might have prompted her decision. Nonetheless, my friend's situation is illustrative of a lack of commitment that I believe has become epidemic in our country. We Americans, who have been blessed with so much, are still inclined to think that the grass is greener somewhere else. As a result, too many of us fail to uphold our commitment to marriage, our commitment to family and friends, our commitment to our jobs, our commitment to church, and even our commitment to God. Perhaps part of the problem is our capitalistic society. Now, don't get me wrong. I am a believer in capitalism as an economic model. However, capitalism creates the illusion that we can get exactly what we want, provided that we have sufficient money to purchase it. As Burger King advertises, you can get it your way. Virtually every retailer provides a massive variety of goods from which to choose in order to tempt us to spend money. We can shop around for just the right car, or just the right house, or just the right college, or just the right doctor. Perhaps there is nothing wrong with shopping around for such things. But what if we start shopping around for just the right spouse, or just the right job, or just the right church? A prime example of how capitalism has infused our personal lives is internet dating services. Now, I do know people who met online and are today happily married. However, even though internet dating has some important benefits, I am concerned about the way in which it encourages us to shop around, not for things, but for people. You can scroll through hundreds or even thousands of other people's profiles. For each profile, you can see a picture of the person, and you can scan the list of personal statistics: age, height, weight, eye color, religion, educational attainment, career, hobbies, workout habits, etc. In order to make the search more efficient, you can tell the computer to eliminate any profiles that have certain characteristics that you do not want. For example, you can eliminate anyone who is a smoker, or who has children, or who has a salary less than an amount of your choosing. Now, certainly we all have a set of characteristics that we are looking for in a spouse, whether we're meeting people online or the old-fashioned way. Still, does it bother anyone that you or I can, with a single click of the mouse, instantaneously eliminate hundreds or thousands of people simply because they make less than $50,000 a year? Some of these people might have a wonderful sense of humor, or they might be incredibly intelligent or generous, or they might be deeply devoted Christians. Is it acceptable to reject a person outright, a living, breathing, thinking being with feelings and beliefs of his or her own, simply because he or she fails to meet one of our stated specifications? Did Jesus reject people who did not live up to every one of his standards? If so, he would have had to reject all of humanity. Quite to the contrary, as our reading from John indicated, as the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. We all believe this assertion of love, but do we follow the command that follows? Love each other as I have loved you. When we look at the state of love in marriage in America today, are we really loving each other as Jesus taught us? The negative consequence of internet dating and a capitalistic view of marriage is that it encourages us to shop around for people in the way that we would shop around for new television. We can look at a picture, read the specifications, and make a judgment of whether we are willing to make the investment. The process might be perfectly fine for buying a new TV, but is it necessarily a good foundation for a new relationship? Is there a danger in the implication that we can find a mate who exactly fits our requirements on 18 different personality dimensions? Does it encourage us to give up on a relationship at the first sign that the other person does not think, act, or look precisely the way we think they should? After all, we are entitled to exactly what we want, and we can just go out and find someone else who has a better set of specifications. If we can reject thousands of people within a millisecond on the computer, then what is stopping us from rejecting a real live person standing in front of us? Why should we remain committed to the other person when the going gets tough and the romance seems to fade into the distance like a shadow? Surely the grass is greener on the other side. 1 John chapter 4 is another well-known passage that echoes what Jesus said in our earlier reading from the Gospel of John. Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. This is how God showed his love among us. He sent his one and only Son into the world that we might live through him. This is love. Not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins. Dear friends, since God has so loved us, we also ought to love one another. If we truly loved one another in the way that God has loved us, imagine how marriages could be transformed. Imagine how communities and even nations could be transformed in their relationships with each other. Many of us lack commitment in our personal relationships, but some of us demonstrate a similar lack of commitment in regard to our jobs. The typical American worker will now have 7 to 10 different jobs over the course of his or her career. In the 25 to 34 age group, more than half of all people have been working at their current job for fewer than 3 years. I believe that there is a lack of loyalty in the workplace, and employers and employees alike share the blame for this state of affairs. In my own work as a teacher, I have seen this lack of loyalty. I have seen veteran teachers pushed out the door with absolutely no appreciation for their many years of service to students. On the other hand, I have seen many younger teachers leave after a couple of years because they are convinced that there is some better opportunity awaiting them. Perhaps a higher salary or better benefits, more respect, more professional freedom, more job fulfillment, or more free time. I believe that God wants us to work and work hard. I believe that work is healthy for both body and soul. It gives us purpose and builds character. As it says in Colossians chapter 3, verse 23, "Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord." I interpret this passage to mean that every job is important and noble and requires our fullest possible effort. This passage contradicts the popular notion that we need to find a job that is fulfilling. In fact, according to this passage, every job can be fulfilling, and it is our responsibility to find that fulfillment within the job that we have, not the job that we think we want. If we followed the Bible and truly worked at our jobs with all our hearts, then perhaps we would feel fulfilled. But how often do we approach our jobs in the way suggested by the Bible? Don't we more frequently complain about our work, vocally wish Friday afternoon would hurry up and arrive, try to minimize our workload as much as we can, and then wonder why we don't feel fulfilled? In my school, far too many teachers and students alike view teaching and learning as an obstacle to get around in order to reach the fun and relaxation of the next vacation period. How much happier might we all be if only we could view our work to be vital and noble and the primary task that God has delegated to us. Somehow I think that if we worked at teaching and learning with all our hearts, we would accomplish much more and be able to enjoy that wonderful sense of accomplishment. We would be better able to enjoy work days and vacation days alike. Even if we take this positive attitude, however, not every day at work is going to be sheer bliss. Every job has many frustrations, both minor and major. In my teaching career, I've been faulted for everything from my tone of voice to the way I folded my arms. I once had a student who blatantly cheated, yet when I gave the student a 0, I was accused of being unchristian by the parents. Although there are years when a certain parent or a certain administrator is making my life difficult, I try to take the bigger view that I have many students who need me to provide them with a quality instruction. And I need to keep working for my students, even when I'm feeling beaten down and discouraged. I once had a colleague with a great deal of faith who, after being threatened with termination, said to me, "I work for the Lord and no one else." Her career, practically her whole life as she knew it, was on the line. But she would continue to give her fullest effort to her students because that was the work that God gave her to do. I was moved by this woman's example of commitment to her work and her faith in God, even as she was being accused by both students and administrators of being incompetent and lacking compassion, accusations that eventually led to her termination after 52 years of teaching. However, in spite of these trials, this colleague of mine had much more fulfillment and a greater peace of mind than most other people with whom I work. She also managed to land another teaching job and continued to teach into her 80s. Her hard work has not always brought her acclaim or a large paycheck, but she has a level of contentment that is lacking in many people who have received much more acclaim and much larger paychecks. Unfortunately, instead of following this example of hard work and faith, most of us are inclined to waste our time envying those whom we imagine to have better working conditions. Instead of trying our best to get the job done right, we decide that we are not paid enough to bother. Instead of being content with what God has provided us, we think that we deserve more. The grass is always greener. Capitalism has convinced us that we can shop around for a better mate and a better job. It has also, in some cases, convinced us that we can shop around for a better church. In fact, many churches in America have tried to market themselves by adopting what they think will be more popular and more modern styles of worship. The problem with shopping around for the perfect church is the same as the problem with shopping around for a perfect mate or a perfect job. There is no perfect church, or perfect mate, or perfect job. The church is a human institution, and as such, it is an imperfect institution. There are dirty politics, power plays, personal conflicts, petty gossip, and disagreements about money in the church, just as in any other human institution or family. We might become offended by something that happens in the church, and maybe rightly so. But do we abandon the church because of an insult or disagreement? The church consists of people who love and need us, just as we love and need them. Our commitment to the church is also a commitment to the people within the church. Just because we are angry at one or two people within the church, is that a serious enough issue to warrant abandoning the entire church and every person who is part of it? I believe that we as Christians must be an example for our neighbors. People in the community are watching us, and if they see us engaging in petty conflicts, then they will conclude that Christianity has nothing to offer. However, if they see us loving each other and helping one another, then they might just decide that God really is a positive force in the world. Sadly, after some people become discontent with their home church, they simply give up on church altogether. Or even worse, they give up on God. Their anger toward what people in the church have said or done leads such people to conclude that God is either a negative force or else is entirely non-existent. After all, if God is the supposed source of all good in the world, then how can his church be so full of corruption, hypocrisy, cover-ups, and abuse of power? If God is the source of good, then how can we explain pedophile priests and the bishops committed or permitted this perversity to continue? The answer, I think, is that God did not say, do, or cause any of these outrages. Although the church may exist for the glory of God, the church is populated by and run by people. People like you and me who are sinners. People like you and me who have petty quarrels with others. People like you and me who are easily corrupted by the lure of power. Just because people declare themselves to believe in God, it does not mean that they cease to be flawed human beings. Just because God does not come down in a brilliant flash of light to stop every instance of wrongdoing in the church, it does not mean that God is not good. God is not the cause of evil committed within the church and within the world. In Exodus chapter 12, God performed the miracle of the Passover. The firstborn of every Egyptian family died, but the Israelite families were spared. As a result of this catastrophe, Pharaoh relented and allowed the Israelites to leave. Having personally witnessed God's power to deliver those who believe in him, the Israelites must have developed a deep and permanent faith in God. Or so we might think. In fact, just 2 chapters later in Exodus 14, the Israelites reached the Red Sea and began to complain loudly against God's plan. It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. Apparently, even in the desert, the grass is always greener on the other side. In this case, the Lord quickly puts the people's doubts to rest by parting the waters of the Red Sea and allowing the Israelites to escape. Yet, just 2 chapters later in Exodus 16, the Israelites complain about the lack of food in the desert. If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted, but you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death. In response, God provides manna for them to eat. 1 chapter later, the Israelites' next grievance is the lack of water to drink. Why did you bring us out of Egypt to make us and our children and our livestock die of thirst? God instructs Moses to strike a rock with his staff, and the rock produces enough water for drinking. Time and again, the Lord miraculously provides for his people's needs. Shortly thereafter, Moses climbs Mount Sinai, and God dictates to him the 10 Commandments and other laws. What do the Israelites do during the time that they are waiting for Moses to return? After God has protected them and shown them miracle after miracle, the people create an idol in the form of a golden calf and begin to worship it, which of course provokes Moses' fury when he returns from Mount Sinai. It sounds much like we heard in a hymn earlier today. I have wept for love of them, but they turn away. What lessons can we take away from the Israelites' short attention span? We see that the Israelites are all too ready to turn away from God the moment that he does not provide exactly what they want at the exact time and in the exact manner that they want it. The people have overwhelming proof that God will help them and give them everything they need, but they still doubt God, quarrel with God, and decide the grass is greener back in Egypt. At the same time, we see that God still reaches out to his people and continues to love them. As God expresses his anger to Moses and threatens to destroy the ungrateful Israelites in Exodus 32, he in fact continues to offer his protection and leads them to the promised land. We see a pattern of people who lack commitment to God, but a God who remains committed and faithful to his people. This pattern is repeated many times in the Bible. After bringing the Israelites tremendous wealth and power under the reigns of David and Solomon, the Israelites fall into immorality and begin to worship other gods in the succeeding generations, actions which eventually lead to cultural decline, military defeat, and exile to Babylon. Nonetheless, God eventually allows the Israelites to return to Jerusalem and then sends Jesus to save them, as well as all people throughout the world. The people of Jerusalem welcome Jesus with open arms on Palm Sunday, yet those same people shout, "Crucify him," just a few days later on Good Friday. Although these people are guilty of the most egregious crime possible, killing their own God and Savior, even then, Jesus demonstrates his commitment to all people by offering forgiveness in Luke 23. "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." The Bible tells us, or shows us many times, that God is fully committed to us. Should we not, therefore, follow his example and demonstrate commitment to God and to others? Should we not be committed to our families, our spouses, our jobs, and our church? I recognize that there are circumstances under which it is necessary to end a marriage, quit a job, or leave a church. Nonetheless, I also sense that we are all too inclined to terminate our commitments at the first sign of trouble or frustration in favor of some alternative relationship, job, or church where the grass is allegedly greener. In addition to the human and economic cost of failing to uphold our commitments, we should also consider the cost to ourselves. After all, there are times when we are not especially lovable. There are times when we make mistakes on the job, and there are times when we sin. Don't we want our spouses to love us when we are unlovable? Don't we want our bosses to continue to employ us when we mess up? Don't we want God to forgive us when we sin? We should be committed to God and others for the simple reason that we want and need God and others to be committed to us. What if God were as quick to turn away from us as we are to turn away from Him? Let us thank God that He remains steadfast and faithful, always there to welcome us with open arms, just as the loving Father welcomes the prodigal son. No matter what we have done, no matter how long we have turned away from God, He is still there waiting for us to come home. As we sang earlier today, like a father, you long to protect me. You know I must learn on my own. Well, I've made my own choice to follow your voice, guiding me back to my home. As another famous hymn states, much older hymn, great is thy faithfulness, O God my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not, thy compassions, they fail not. What would happen if all people were to take this example of patient faithfulness to heart and focus on their commitment to others rather than their own selfish desires and petty frustrations? What if all people were to show love and forgiveness to others because God has first shown love and forgiveness to us? Imagine the power to transform the whole world if only we would place as much emphasis on commitment as God has. I pray that we will renew our commitment to our families, our spouses, our jobs, our church, and our God, that they will renew our commitment to us, and that as a result, we will create a better world to the glory of our God.